Hello, computer science students. Welcome back to another video. This is the first in our video series about classes. And so I have two main objectives here. One is to make sure that we've covered how to import and start working with classes. And the second is showing you how to get started with writing your own class. So for the first point, we'll cover this in class a little bit too, but I may as well start this video series out with it. When we're working on labs or even classwork in this class, I will often be providing you projects that you'll be able to open and start working with. And so in this case, we're working on the Week 02 classes project. And so to begin with, we're going to go under File and hit Import existing projects into Workspace. And here it's important that you've already clicked and downloaded the file from Moodle. But assuming you have, you're going to navigate in your Finder or in your Explorer if you're on Windows, and you're going to find that zip file you downloaded. I put it in a folder already for me, but you should be able to find it in your Downloads folder, sorting by modified if nothing else. So once you find that Week 02 classes.zip, you're going to hit Open. For me, I'm going to hit Cancel. I've already imported it. It should show up with a checked off project in here. And you should be able to click Finish. And so when you do, you'll end up with a W02 classes project in your Eclipse Explorer like I have here. So this is the code we're going to work on. If you want to follow along with me, you can. If you want to watch the videos and then fill it in later, you can, to make sure you got it. Whatever you'd like. So assuming that you have, in fact, imported the project, let me also show you a couple little window maneuvering tips and tricks. You should open up your team class and your tester class down in your source folder. So when you do, they'll show up like this, side by side, where you click one tab, click the other tab. You'll see it's often useful in this course to be able to look at a tester and a class side by side. So if you click that tab and drag it, it should show you various ways to orient the windows. Personally, I like doing a left and right window. Left for either the tester class or the class you're writing, and right for the other. Which side is which, I don't particularly have a preference on, but it can be helpful to be able to see what you're writing and see what you're testing at the same time. So I'm going to continue this video series with the windows set up this way, try to give myself as much space as possible to see the comments, and we'll start filling things in. So to begin with, before we ever start writing a class, we should, the first thing to know is what is the problem? What are we trying to represent? And so for the course demo that we're going to go through in this video series, we would like to represent teams. Sports teams of any sort is kind of what I'm thinking of here. And so to do that, the reason why we have to know that is when we think about teams, we think about classes and organizing and objects, you need to think, what information does my team need? If I'm representing a sports team, what information is important to me or my employer or whatever I'm working on? So for our project, we want to be able to represent the team's name, its location, how many games the team has played, and how many they have won. If you really wanted to make this kind of bigger and better, you might also represent what type of team they are, maybe football, maybe basketball. For now, Elon University as a whole is going to be one single team, for example. So now that that's what we want to accomplish, that's the first step in this process. And you'll notice that I've done some talking and some processing before even typing. This will become more and more common as you program. Is that you'll want to write out the requirements of what does this person want, what do they need the program to be able to do, and from there you'll be able to pick out, all right, well, what should I have as a class, and what information does that class need to store? That's always the first question, is what information does this class need? Well, if my class is representing teams, and the idea is that I will create a team maybe for Elon, a team for UNC, a team for NC State, and I want to be able to track all these teams and when they win or lose and how many games they played, what their win percentages are, so you can report it to ESPN or to whatever. So the question is, when I create my team, what information does it need? And how do I represent that information? So to start, if you're representing a team, almost all teams have a location. In Elon's case, that is Elon. So I'm going to use a string for this. I'm going to call it team location. Now the unique part about creating a class, typing string team location should be familiar. But when you create a class and you define these variables, you don't know what kind of teams people are going to create. So you cannot give specific values to these variables, these fields, instance variables. So I could type Elon here, but then every team that I create would start with the name Elon. But I should also be able to create University of North Carolina or NC State or Duke or Wake Forest. And so all these are going to have different locations. And so the idea of a team is defining the structure for what information will I be putting in, but not necessarily putting it in yet. We will also need a name. Right now we would be the Phoenix, Elon Phoenix. Games played. And so, following our pattern here, we might do string games played. But that probably doesn't really make sense. When you define this class, you also want to make intelligent choices for types. Games played, well, you've played either 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 games. That sounds like integers to me. It'll also let us do math with the games played later. So an int makes sense. And then the games we've won. So I'll maybe do games won. I'm also going to use an int here. Depending on the type of sport we're in or something to that effect, you may make an argument for double. If you're playing soccer with European rules, you have wins, ties, and losses, and ties count a point, and wins count 3 points, and there's all sorts of systems out there. For our case, we're going to assume that the games we're representing have no draws. And so we're just going to represent games played and games won. And so we don't really need a variable for games lost, because we can always find that out by subtracting games won from games played. So this should be the only 4 variables we need to represent our teams for this particular project. So these are now our 4 member variables. Now, one last note before I finish this video up. Member variables, instance variables, and fields are all vocabulary terms that ultimately mean the same thing. Zybooks references fields. It's the same thing as basically what I've written here. These are the data that our object needs to store, hold, and use. And so now we've created our class and we've defined the fields that we're going to use. The next topic we're going to talk about is creating a basic toString method, and then we'll talk about constructors and how constructors work, what they do. So I will talk to you guys next time, and see you later.